Hi, everybody. We are very proud and very excited to welcome Antonio Campos to our Q&A all the way from Chile. That's where he is. Welcome, Antonio.
Hi. Hey, Tova. Am I here?
So, Antonio, as I told you when we first spoke, it was late at night and I was just going to check your movie a little bit and continue, see it really at another time. But I was so riveted by the performances and the intensity and the power of what was unfolding in front of my eyes that I just had to finish it. And then I couldn't fall asleep even right away. And so I'm not surprised that it's a hit on Netflix. And we have a lot of questions about it. But first, I really wanted to ask you to digress a little bit and ask when and where did you start in the business?
Well, I've always, not always, but I've wanted to be a filmmaker for a very long time. I've probably known that I wanted to be a filmmaker, or had the sense that I wanted to be a filmmaker around 10 or 11. And it really started, honestly, at the New York Film Academy, because I was walking in the subway with my older brother, and I saw a poster on the wall for the New York Film Academy. And I said to my big brother, I said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go there. And my big brother said, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. You're too young. You can't do that. I was 13 at the time. and I said, yo, you watch, I'm going to do it. And so I became really determined to get in. And I knew at the time they didn't have a teen program, but I have Brazilian and Italian blood in me. So I had hair on my face very early on, and I looked older than I was. And so I convinced my mom to go with me to the New York Film Academy office, and I talked to someone there, and I thought it would seem better if I said I was 14. So I said, I'm 14 years old, and I really want to be a filmmaker, and I'm really committed to doing this, and I would like to do your 6-week program this summer. And they said, well, they really got a sense that I was passionate and that I was serious, and that I wasn't just some, kid that was kind of like curious. It was like, I really want to be a filmmaker, and I really want to learn how to make movies, and I think this is the place to do it. And so the guy said to me, well, look, you're 14 years old. I wasn't. You're 14 years old. And, we don't have anybody right now coming into this program this summer that's less than 16. There's actually one 16-year-old, then the next youngest is like 25, and then it goes all the way up to 50. So just say you're 16, because at least you won't be younger than that guy.
Yeah.
And so I did. I went through this 6-week program saying that I was 16. And I would get into really funny conversations with the other 16-year-old about like going to college and girls and pretending like I've had these experiences that I hadn't had yet. But it was it was an incredibly important 6 weeks of my life, because I made my first short films, and I shot them on 16 millimeter, and I edited them on Steambex. And for 6 weeks, I was living this other reality. My mom and my dad, my apartment, my parents, where I live with my family, was 4 blocks away. So they were comfortable with me staying up late to edit. I don't know if I told you this story, but I would be up very late editing, and I'd forget to call my mom. And one night it was like 3 a.m, and I was over the Steamback just trying to figure out how to cut this short film. And someone goes, hey, not taps me on the shoulder because I have headphones on. He said, hey, I think your mom's outside and with the cops. And so I went, and my mom was in her robe with 2 NYPD, and they had come because my mom was so scared that something bad had happened. So she got the cops to come and let her into the building. And I had to like save face with all these people that thought I was a teen. I was like, man, my mom's really not letting me grow up. I'm 16. I should be able to do these things. And my first short film, just to finish the story, my first short film was called Puberty. That was my project. I had done other short films, but the Puberty was that was my final 10-minute short film. And it was about a boy going through puberty. And I still show it to people. I'm very proud of the little thing. I think it's very sweet and it's very honest, and I really put all my heart into it. And I remember this moment very vividly, and this is one of the most important moments for me as a filmmaker. I was so nervous to watch the film with an audience, and I stayed in the projection booth, and I controlled the audio upstairs because I think we were running 2 sound mags, so I could control the effects and the VO, and I didn't know how people reacted. And I came down after all the films had screened, and the first thing I saw was my father, and he was crying. He was so proud, and he had his arms wide open like this.
Oh.
And it was, for me, just as a son, as a filmmaker, it was the validation, the support. I mean, my mother has always been my greatest champion, and the one that's always it always encouraged me as a child. But that moment, that image of my father with his open arms, he was so proud of what I had done, really is something that always has stayed with me as a filmmaker. But yeah, that was the New York Film Academy was where I started to make movies, 97, when I was 13 years old.
Thank you so much for coming back here. I really
Thank you for having me. I've been dying to tell that story to
giving back. I know. I love this story. So what happened after that? You're very prolific. And then you had a short after school that premiered in Cannes, right? In competition. And what were you, 25?
No. First I had Buy It Now, which was a short film. Buy It Now played in the Cine Fondation. And that was when I was 20 years old. I was in NYU at the time. And it won the first prize there. And as part of the first prize, they guarantee your first feature a special screening. So we use that to entice investors to put money into our first feature. It was really the start of our company, Borderline Films. Wow. So we enticed investors to put money, and then we got $250,000, and we made After School when we were about 23 years old, 22, 23, and it premiered, and I was 24 at Cannes. So it was a very, that was the beginning of my feature making, yeah.
But you were immediately industrial, and you just got your own company and kept producing and directing and so on and so forth. Incredible. And of course, subsequent films, all got like world premiere in Cannes and in Sundance. And now this led to you getting to make a movie with this incredible cast, let's face it, for Netflix. And on top of it, it's a hit. So how did this movie come about, first of all? And second, what did you do right about it? What do you think contributed the most to its success? Beside good script and good directing.
Well, I think I don't rush anything. And I think that not rushing things in general has played out well. I don't rush anything. I don't rush into production. I don't rush into correcting, like I don't rush into addressing notes. I like to talk things out. Some people get frustrated with how much I want to think about things and consider things and not not jump into something very quickly. And so I think that's part of why I don't make movies that frequently. I mean, I've essentially made a movie I've had a movie come out every 4 years. I don't know, that's not been the plan, it's just kind of how it's turned out. In between, I've done a lot of things, but.
Can I say something? Because Nancy Meyer does the same thing. She writes the script, she then does, shows it to a friend, then she does a reading, then she finesses it, and she said at the end, I know that somebody like Jack Nicholson would want to do it.
Yes.
And it's because she's not rushing the process. She takes it very seriously.
Yes.
So it's
And
the same thing.
that's yeah, totally. And I think I mean I think a lot of filmmakers do that. I think especially if you have a very personal film or a film that doesn't abide by conventional rules and things like that. So I think that the film benefited from that time. And the other thing that it benefited because in between when I started to make the movie, I started to write the script, adapt the book with my brother, I made The Sinner. And, Chris, it's interesting how one thing leads to another. And, After School in many ways led to Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. That's not my movie as a director, but it's a movie I produced. And that was the idea of our company, that one person's success would mean success for the others. Yes. And Martha then helped us make James White, Josh Maughn's first movie. And in some ways that the producing also kept me active when I wasn't directing.
Yes.
And kept me sort of in the business or whatever, like I was still working. And then I made Christine, which was my first film, sort of not with Josh and Sean leading the producing. And Christine, in a lot of ways, was the film that then led to me getting The Sinner. And then The Sinner, I think, even though it was television, was a success and a very commercial one. And then that changed the perception of me as not just sort of an indie filmmaker, but as someone who, can make things that kind of work beyond the art house. And so, but that's all time. That's just patience, letting things kind of organically happen when they happen.
Have a certain confidence about you, I suppose. And yeah. How did that come about? How did you find the book? What did attract you to that book? How did Netflix get involved? And what else let's go there, and then I'll continue to ask you about.
So the book came to me through a music supervisor, Randall Poster. He and I were working together on a film I was producing. I think it was James White. And we got along really well. And he's a voracious reader. And he said, I read this book and I think you'll like it. And if you like it, I'd like to produce it for you. And I read it and I loved it. And I said, I'd like to do it with my brother, who hasn't written a script yet, but I know he'll do really well with this material. So that's how it started. We didn't start writing the script until 2015, though the reading of the book happened in 2012 or 2013. 2015, my brother and I started to try and figure out this book and try and figure out how to turn it into a movie. What I loved about the book was a few things. One was that I felt like the book that Donna Ray Pollock, the author, had found a way of blending two of my favorite genres, which are Southern Gothic and
which one?
Southern Gothic and hard-boiled crime fiction. And it kind of turned into this thing that's Midwestern Gothic, is the way that people identify it, And I just love the world that he was creating. His characters were characters that felt familiar because they had felt like you had seen this corrupt sheriff and you had met these kind of serial killers. But there was also something very specific about how he was rendering them and the way that he was getting into their heads. And his fearlessness about going to certain places with these kind of awful people. But then the thing the book had that was the spine of it, that held it all together, was this story about a father and a son. Yeah. And this trauma that the father passes on to the son. And how does the son deal with it? And so much of that trauma is tied into religion. And this relationship that the father develops with religion that involves violence, that's connected to violence in a way. And so I was just fascinated by this exploration of religion through these two genres in a world that was so far from anything that I ever lived. I mean, I grew up in the village, with Brazilian father and an Italian mother. I had no connection to Appalachia, but I'm always drawn to places that are very different from where I grew up. And so I embraced the book, and the book was our Bible. We used it as, you know, the thing we always look back to when we needed, you know, when we needed to fill in, you know, color between the lines and things. But my brother and I just had a really wonderful time kind of taking on this very dense novel and trying to figure out how to translate it into a movie, into a 2.5 hour experience. So how did we get to Netflix? Well, first thing that happened was, and this kind of goes to the casting, which I'm sure everybody has questions about.
Exactly.
So in 2016, I had written a draft, 2016 or 17. It was after Good Time had been shot, and I had become friends with Rob Pattinson. And Rob...
Who was shot? Who was shot?
Good Time. Robert Pattinson had done Good Time already. Do you remember them, the Safdie brothers?
Yeah.
So he had done it, but it hadn't premiered yet. And we had become friends through a mutual acquaintance. And I gave Rob the script, and Rob really loved, it was a very early draft, he really loved Tea Garden. And he said, I want to play this guy. And I said, great, you can play that guy. So that was how Rob came on, very first person. Then we worked with, we were dealing with an agent from WME who had read an early draft as well, and he liked it. And he represents Tom Holland. And Tom Holland had just been cast as Spider-Man, but hadn't played him, or hadn't been seen as him yet. So he had been like cast and like started shooting.
Right,
so
right.
Tom came on sort of very early on as well, before he was kind of world famous as Spider-Man. But I knew he was so talented just from meeting him, and from really just sort of his stuff as a kid. You know, The Impossible was the thing that I think really stuck out. And then Mia Wasikowska came on. I was producing a movie, and she was in it, and she read the script and agreed to do Helen. And then that was kind of the key cast. The other piece of casting that changed eventually was Chris Evans. Chris Evans came on, and I had met him, and I had really loved his work in theater in a play called Lobby Hero that he had done on Broadway with Kenny Lonergan. And so with those pieces, we went to market. So we had a draft. We had also partnered up with 9 Stories, Jake Gyllenhaal's company, done a final pass on the draft, got Chris Evans, then went to market. One of the people we met with was Netflix. Netflix loved it, and then made an offer on it. And then that's how Netflix came about. And then we did the notes process with them, but you know, not very much at that time. We had to sort of keep adjusting the script as we got into production to deal with schedule and budget stuff.
So interesting. You would think that Jake Gyllenhaal would get the role rather than Tom Holland, even though Tom is so much younger, because Tom is British and Jake Gyllenhaal is the...
Jake is at this point, we never actually offered anything to Jake, you know. I think Jake was interested in and why it appealed to Jake. I should say that Reva Marker, his partner, was really the sort of piece that brought me in, and why, because I felt like she was the producing partner we needed, her and her other partner at the time, Annie Martyr. Yes. But Jake, I think Jake was attracted to it because also we didn't approach him as an actor, we approached him as a producer. And so I think he respected that and was interested in helping. So
it caught my eye in 2 ways. One, of course, because I saw that the director was you, but the headline was really about this movie, and is it controversial? Is it not? You know what I mean? Is it because it was violent and religion, and God knows you don't want to mix the two, and all of that. So I think that headline and then your name, I said, well, I must see it, you know, but obviously it had the same kind of attraction to a lot of other people. And, you know, Mike tells me that a lot of the student and the staff wanted to go home because they saw the movie and they're excited about it. So there's something about it that attracts everybody. And of course, then goes the filmmaking, because you really cannot take your eyes off those people, and you can't believe those people actually exist, you know. So do you have anything to add to that, or you want to think about it and we'll come back to it? And maybe the
No,
student will ask a question better than me.
yeah. Well, I think that for me, look, I think that it's an interesting movie because it's an interesting movie to have gotten as wide of an audience as it has, because it's not conventionally structured. It has a kind of rotating cast ensemble. But I think that the sort of like, I think that I think it's very eye-grabbing. Like I think the cast, I think that the imagery in the movie is very striking, and I think that faith and violence are things that people are like kind of like, they're like, they don't want to look at it, but they're also kind of curious because those are the things that are part of our lives. And I do think that you know, the thing with the violence in the movie I find so interesting because and part of it is I think I might have a different relationship with violence in movies, and I think everybody has a different relationship with it. But I find that like there's a lot more violent movies out there that people don't comment on the violence because they just accept it. Like there's a John Wick movie, there's the amount of people that die over the course of this 2.5 hours is the amount of people that die in the first 5 minutes of a John Wick movie. And we celebrate that violence. We kind of like applaud it because
it's cartoonish in a way. It's almost cartoonish, poetic.
Yeah, but it's unemotional. It's just kind of cinematic and visceral. And I think that the violence in this film, though the violence is very fast and it's actually not that gory most of the time, I think it's because you're invested in the character that's committing the violence and invested in the character that's receiving the violence. So you don't know. It's a very disruptive film, I think, emotionally for a lot of people in that way. But I think that's what makes it the devil all the time. I mean, it's intentionally, it's a bit like when I talked about the movie, I was like, look, the movie should feel like you're breathless for 2 hours and whatever minutes until you get into the car with Arvin and you can catch your breath. And so it's almost like the film feels more violent than it actually is. And I think it has to do with the emotion that's at play.
It was unconventional also. It was just unconventional. And the characters and the kind of violence it was, where it took place, everything about it was really kind of unique. And when it's well done that way, you know, it's caught your eye. Anyway, let me open to the student. Let me see what they want to know. Mike? Where's Mike?
Yes, hi. We have a question here from Sam McGarvey. Sam, we've enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Mike?
Sam, you there?
Oh, so it looks like Sam's mic is not working, but I will ask his question for him. Sam says, and I'm reading exactly what he wrote, so these are his words. For those who've had the opportunity to experience the devil all the time, I need not mince words in attempts to sufficiently recount the sheer brilliance of the featured performances. As a director, what qualities do you seek out or value most highly in an actor?
It's a couple things. I mean, I like actors that take big swings, and actors that make strong choices. I like actors with distinct faces that aren't necessarily. Can you hear me?
You like actors with what?
With distinct faces. I like actors that aren't necessarily conventionally beautiful or handsome, but interesting looking. I think I go back to like the actors that I loved from the 40s and 50s. I don't think like Humphrey Bogart, James Cagney are handsome men, but I think that they're memorable faces and they're expressive.
Right.
And so I'm always drawn to that kind of character in their just their visual, the way they look. And then really a lot of what I base my casting on is how I feel when I meet them and I talk to them, and that I feel like I'm talking to someone that I want to spend time with, and that I think is genuinely a good person. I do not like divas. I do not like actors that play games, or that they try to sort of like play these power games, or try and make people feel uncomfortable, and you can't have conversations. They're very precious about everything they do. It's just like, it's just too hard of a thing to make a movie already than to deal with that personality. So in general, my sets tend to be very warm and friendly places, and there's a real openness to them, and it comes from maybe indie movies and the way that we operated on our films when there was like 20 of us making an indie. But I still have this mentality of it being a family, and I really like that feeling. Not everybody feels that. There was a crew member on this movie that hated me. The sound guy hated me. I didn't know why, but he hated me. And we finally talked about it at the end. He came up to me at the end and he's like, man, you probably think I hated you. And I said, yeah, I do. I would say good morning to you and you wouldn't say anything. No, man, I didn't hate you. I just have some anger problems. I really admired what you did. But the whole film, I was like, why is the sound guy hate me? But I remember my script supervisor said to me, he goes, look, Tony, I know you love this family feel and everybody's family, but like, not everybody needs to be family. And I was like, okay, I appreciate that, TJ. But I really like that feeling. So anyway, when I cast, I'm also thinking about their personality and just the fact that we're going to spend so much time together. And I also will say I trust my casting director, and I trust that they're going to bring really wonderful people, whether it's Doug Abell, the guy in New York who got a very strong theater background, does wonderful casting, or Tracy Kilpatrick, who's been my Southern local casting person in on The Sinner, on Christine, on this. I trust them, and I know that when they're bringing people to me, they've thought about it, and they've got really interesting taste.
Excellent. Okay. Next question.
We have a question here from Miguel de Campo Yanez. Miguel, we've enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I watched the movie 2 nights ago to be prepared for this. I really liked it. I love the performances, the direction, everything. Well, but my question could be, well, as an NYFA student myself, I'm gonna finish my semester very soon and be on this. Well, I wanted to ask you, what could you recommend to people like me who are about to become graduates to make this jump from a NYFA student to a film director? What could you suggest?
I think, one, everyone's career is different, and everyone's career times out differently. So always just expect that things may not turn out the way that you want them to right away, but and that things might take longer. Doesn't mean it has to. Things could happen very quickly. That oftentimes does. But I would say, keep your network of friends and collaborators close. What worked for me and for my partners back then was being open to doing something besides directing, being open to, in our case, it was being open to support another filmmaker, and to sort of, if your film is not taking off right away, maybe sort of get involved in some other filmmakers' process and help them make their movies, and that thing might pay back, that might come back to you. The other thing I always say is like, just keep making short films in between, before you make your feature, in between features, I just like always try and be working, because short films are such a safe place to experiment, to make mistakes, and to learn. And that's so vital for when you finally do get the chance to make your feature film. and then the other thing is just kind of like put yourself out there. If you have a short film, submit it to every film festival. Go to the film festivals. If right now you can't like attend all the events, just be as like just kind of embrace the networking aspect of being a filmmaker, because you can be the most talented filmmaker in the world, but if you are not able to just kind of like hold a conversation or convey your abstract ideas into concrete, terms, you're not going to be able to make your movie. So it's important to just sort of practice talking about making movies, talking about your movie in a way that people can understand what your vision is, and so that you can start, building a network. There's so many things, but I guess those are the things that come to mind right away.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
You too. Good
Thanks.
luck.
We have a question here from Sarah Hall. Sarah asks, how do you go about producing and getting your films financed when you were starting out?
It was just like pure hustle. It was just like this blind determination and faith, and we embraced how much we didn't know. We played up how much we didn't know. Like we were always, oh shoot, we didn't know you couldn't do that. There was always this kind of like, we knew that we didn't know a lot, but we knew that you can kind of get away with it starting out. Like people like to help you starting out, I find. I think people do, for the most part. You find some assholes who, I've met some when I was younger who didn't want to, even engage, who would say things like, I don't want to help you because nobody helped me. It's like, well, that's unfortunate. But in general, I find that when you're starting out, just like people do tend to admire ambition and chutzpah and admire your determination to get your film made. And the more that you believe in something, the more that people will believe in you. And, the more succinct you can be about what you want to make, also the more, people will be able to sort of understand and listen, because sometimes you don't have that much time to convey your ideas. But in general, like, just kind of this kind of determination on a practical sense. Like, look, I mean, we got all our first films made with very small budgets, pulling every favor we could, and just kind of honestly looking for people that we knew that either had money or had connections to money, and would kind of start building up budgets that way very slowly. And James White, I think we had like 40 investors, it was just kind of crazy. Martha was like a whole weird bag. On After School was also like another 20 people. And that was for 250,000, it's a mess in terms of the accounting, but it's like when you're starting out, you might need to do that. And obviously now there's things like Kickstarter, GoFundMe, and things like that you can turn to as well. And the other thing I'd say is also just like keep your budget low, work with what you have, try and play to that. Like think about, even when you're writing, kind of, you don't want to kind of put yourself in a box, but it's sometimes a good exercise sort of thinking about what you have access to and building around that. Because all of our early films, a lot of it was kind of building around like what we knew we could get. Martha, for instance, was that was my family farm that we shot on. And it was like Sean had seen it and he knew that that's kind of where he wanted to set the story, and kind of thought about it only in that place. But yeah, I hope that helped somehow.
Can I ask you something? Hello?
Yeah, sure.
You also did you start the company with 2 other people? Do you think that there's some kind of strengths in numbers a little bit?
Oh yeah,
Support
totally.
at the beginning, and everybody can bring something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I went to NYU, and when you start NYU, you really feel like, oh, this is going to be everyone for themselves. It's like everybody wants to be a director, and that means everybody's just kind of like an island. And by the time you get to second year, people start to really kind of get out of that headspace and realize, oh, this is about a community, and this is about building a community, and finding the people that you want to work with. And with Borderline, we just kind of found, me and these, we just found kindred spirits, and we supported each other. I mean, it doesn't work for everybody. It worked for us, but we basically had this model where we just split everything 3 ways. Like literally, if I did something and Josh and Sean didn't do anything on that project, they still got the same amount of money that I did, because it was an investment in them, and that investment would pay back when they directed. You know what I mean? So it was always this kind of like paying it forward, knowing that, exactly what you're saying, strength in numbers. And so, and it's also such a sort of lonely, hard road to go on by yourself. If you can find people that you admire, that you respect, who respect you and want to like, are good people, then embrace it and try and form partnerships. Yeah, it doesn't mean you have to be you're not married to anybody, but you can really kind of look at it like, this is a partnership and we're going to try and make movies together.
I think so. I think it's way too hard and lonely to do it by yourself, unless you already have a platform somehow. Yeah,
totally.
We have a question here from Charles Engelsjerd. Charles, we've enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Hey.
Great. Antonio, first off, I want to say that I absolutely loved this film. I thought it was a really important message that it carried. And I wanted to specifically ask you about working with actors on set, and specifically if you ever find or how you manage and deal with working with actors who are using different acting techniques or approaches in their craft. And do you ever find that certain combinations of techniques ever cause problems on set?
I've never had that problem. And I've worked with so many actors. I've had other problems with actors, but sometimes it's almost more like you might find an actor who's just like, that has like really specific kind of demands that then frustrates another actor. And that can be a problem. Like an actor might be like, I can't with all these people in my eye line, can you get them out of here? And then you got to deal with that thing, and then you got to like get everybody off that doesn't need to be there. And then, they might have a way of working that like, where they want to talk about everything and the other actor doesn't want to talk about everything. They want it to be more, loose or in the moment. You kind of just stomach it and just kind of go, okay, like, let's deal with this. There's not really, you can't, I mean, it's hard to go, look, you have to stop doing this thing that you're doing, because there's always potential that could freeze them up. And then you're in like, then you have another problem that's even worse, which is like, you got an actor that's like, just can't deliver. And so you got to be creative. Like, what do? You look at the scene, can I just cover this in a way where I don't need to, where I can just kind of isolate this guy or girl and just kind of get them on their own, kind of one-on-one with me, the other actor coming off camera, but like, I'll get their coverage and they'll be great in that. And we'll, and then I'll just kind of work around it and it's fine. Another way is you just kind of like, you just, if you see that it's really annoying another actor, acknowledge it to the other actor. Like, always make the other person feel seen and heard, and be like, I know they're doing this, but like, just like give it one more take and we'll get through it and it's fine. And then if it's really a problem, if it's really an issue, they're being difficult, then you talk about it. But your question about techniques, I've never had a problem with techniques, because then they're just kind of in their own world, and usually a good actor if they need something, they'll be very clear about what they need. Like, can you feed me that line? Can you do it like this? Like, try to give it to me like a little angrier. Like, they know what they need, and they'll cue the other actor to give them what they need. So, and I've worked with so many different actors that have so many different techniques. In general, like actors, I find good actors like to be around other actors, and they feed off of that energy. And so, you know, and no one's one technique is so like, I find that no actor is ever so dogmatic about it. Like, they're kind of picking and choosing the things that they do and how they do it. And so, you know, they're usually pretty adaptable. If you get two actors that have two different techniques that aren't working, like they're like wild animals. You got to sort of separate them, sort of one and the other, and kind of give them each their own time, and then let them get in the ring and have it out. But you never want to put anybody on the spot. You never want to make anybody feel like they're the problem,
Completely.
or that they're you know. It's just kind of like, let's all figure it out, and if I need to talk to you separately, we will. I hope that answers your question. It's always like it's a case by case thing. It's so hard. Just work with a bunch of actors, and you'll figure it out.
You know, I'll do just that.
Work with, they always like. I remember working with an actor on my first short film that got attention, and he was like he was a nightmare, and he really put me through the ringer, and it was one of the best experiences because after that I was like, I've worked with that person, and now I'm like ready for it, you know?
There's always something good coming out of the bed.
Yeah, you need to acknowledge it, yeah.
We have a question here from Federica Carlino. Federica, we have enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, I thought that having the writer, Donna Ray Pollock, as the narrator was amazing, a brilliant idea. And I have a couple questions. One is kind of personal, just because as a director, I'd like to know your relationship with religion because of directing approach.
Mm-hmm.
And the second question is, were you afraid that your cast will take away the focus from your movie?
Mm-hmm. My relationship with religion is that I was raised by a very devout Italian American Catholic mom, and my grandfather was very religious and very devout, and my father was not at all. My father had gone to Catholic school till he was 18, and then basically said, I've had enough of this, and wouldn't even go into a church. And so I had these two kind of these two extremes that were providing me, giving me direction when I was a kid. And so I kind of grew up very confused and conflicted and struggling with it, because I couldn't let go of the Catholic guilt. I couldn't let go of this sense that there was always something that I was doing that was wrong. I didn't quite know, and I didn't really I never had a formal religious education, so I was always kind of looking to fill in the gaps myself, and then I would make up rules of my own, because I was like, well, this seems like something wrong, so I need to figure out how to pray, and I would make up my own prayers and things and try and then there was a couple prayers that I knew, and I would repeat those prayers. So I had this very odd relationship with religion. I really struggled with it. And then as I got older, I had I started to really question the Catholic Church as an organization, and question the way it operated. And so, yes, I have a complicated relationship with religion. I'm really interested in people who are religious. I'm really fascinated by people that are extreme believers, that believe so deeply that they're willing to go to these lengths. And I think it's very dangerous that these people exist, and also that people take advantage of them, and they can be very manipulated. So that was that part of the movie, that story, that really compelled me to adapt it. In terms of the cast, no, because look, I mean, also the other thing about this cast is they weren't until we started to go through the trailer, the actual reality of how big this cast is didn't really dawn on me, because I don't ever see famous people. It's like it's like Sixth Sense. I see famous people. It's like, no, I don't see the famous people. I see, well, the characters they play. I just kind of see the person in front of me and the character they're going to play. I knew that as we were putting together the trailer, that like this cast was going to be very like the cast itself was going to be such a kind of like selling point. It totally embraced it, because I felt like, look, every single one of these actors is fantastic in this movie, and they're all wonderful people, and I want to celebrate them. And so like let's make it like an announcement that these people are all in the movie. And and the cast was so, in my mind, calibrated between people that were very famous and well known, and then people that are lesser famous, kind of more character actors, and then the cast itself in the movie is very balanced, because obviously the trailer highlights all the stars, but you see in the movie, it's like there's people that you've never seen before that are just wonderful local actors, some of them non-actors, having scenes with Bill Skarsgård or Tom Holland or whoever. And so to me, the beauty of casting something like this that's an ensemble is to find the balance of, you know, very famous people, relatively unknown, and then totally unknown actors. So yeah, if I was a, you know, I think cast like those movies that they come out with, like Valentine's Day, or like, I don't know, those movies that come out where it's just like this, you know, smorgasbord of actors, where the cast is like literally 100 famous people and each one has like 5 minutes. That's a different thing. And so I just knew that this film was very different, and the way that we were approaching character was so different, that I never was worried that the cast would take away from the story. If anything, I thought it would elevate it and actually kind of like be the thing that might draw a lot of people to something that is quite challenging and unconventional.
Thank you. We have a question here from Sarah Bautelier. Sarah, we've enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Hi, thanks for answering my question. I think you might have touched on some of this a bit before, but I was wondering how your experience as a producer has helped or influenced being a director and vice versa, and how important do you think it is to have a diversity of experience when working in film today?
I think it's important that you can, like as a director, I think it's important to have other experiences than just directing. And that includes acting, working in other aspects of the industry. You know, between making my first short film and then getting into NYU, I worked as an intern at a company called the Shooting Gallery for a few years, mostly in the summers, but then like once a week. So I kind of sort of got to know a little bit about every bit of the business on that side, like the independent film side. And then I worked for John Demi's company called Clinica Estetico, and then I worked for a management company. And so I got to know a lot of different, it got a lot of perspectives to think about how the sausage is made. And then in terms of producing, directing, it's interesting because I think that sometimes as a director, it's really good to think like a producer. It's really good to sort of like look at a problem and be able to sort of weigh it versus all the other things you have to achieve in a movie, and know which things are you want to fight for and which things you are willing to compromise or let go of, especially when you're looking at a budget and making those hard choices. you're looking at a schedule, you're looking at your script, and you're like, how do I, you know, and so it's like you're thinking like a producer, a writer, a director. Like I think those, it's like, it's great to, you got to think in those terms. It's great to be able to think like an actor if you're thinking about how to schedule a day, you know, and how you as an actor might respond if, you know, if you're given the most challenging thing the top of the day as opposed to sort of like the middle or the end of the day. I mean, I just think I always encourage everybody who wants to be a filmmaker to do as many jobs as possible, you know, whatever that might be.
Thank you. We do have a question here from Gabriella Ono. Gabriella, we've enabled you to start your microphone. What is your question for Antonio?
Hi, thank you for coming. So my question is, because you have international parents, have you ever thought about making a foreign language movie?
Yeah. All the time. I made Simon Killer. My second movie was kind of half in French, and I speak conversational French. I lived there for a while, but I don't speak it enough to like write a script in it. So that was a fully improvised movie with just an outline. So I would sometimes write dialogue in the morning, go to set, and my actors would translate it with me, and that's how we would do it. I thought it was really exciting, cool way of collaborating. I've always wanted to make a film. I've been thinking a lot about making a film about my childhood and my relationship with my Italian grandfather, who would always come to stay with my family when he was older. And my father is Brazilian, but my mother speaks fluent Portuguese. So I grew up in a bilingual house, and so I've always thought about sort of exploring that part of myself. And then I've always dreamed about making something about my father in Brazil, and his childhood, growing up in a kind of middle-class family in a small city there. Yeah, I think about it a lot. And now that I'm in Chile and my wife is Chilean and we're here, I think about the idea of making a film here. You know, there's so many beautiful places to shoot in Chile.
Thank you for that. Tova, I know that you have a couple more questions that you wanted to get to before we wrapped up.
Yes. First of all, I wanted to know if you can tell us a little bit about your project with Harrison Ford.
Yeah, sure. It's called the Staircase. It's based on the story of Michael Peterson, and they made a documentary about him called The Staircase. It's on Netflix. It's like a 13-part series. It's a very twisty, turning trial, true crime story. And I've been working on it in some capacity for 11 years. I got the documentary in 2008 on Christmas, and I started adapting it as a feature. Eventually took it to Fox Searchlight, worked on it there, just never quite worked as a feature, realized it needed to be a series, and then started writing it as a series and wrote the pilot, got Harrison attached, and then we have it set up at HBO Max now, and we're in the middle of writing the scripts. It's
a fascinating story, always.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because he was so intelligent. It's not like the kind of guy, you know, he was not the kind of guy that you would suspect he'll do all that. So it's very complex.
And there's so many aspects of not just him, but the story that were not in the documentary that we're touching on in the series, that are even crazier.
Wasn't there a book or a couple of books, or there's a lot
about him, about the story? Yes, yeah.
It was bestseller even and all that. Then I have another question for you, because you are obviously attracted to kind of darker material. I'm looking at your posters and they're all dark. There's not one colorful.
Here? My room?
Yeah.
I mean,
they're all dark. They're all black.
It's because it's dark. There's not enough light.
When are you going to do a comedy?
I'm working on one. I'm
Really?
thinking, yeah. There's a
Obviously,
friend of mine. There's a friend of mine. There's a book, and a friend of mine and I were kind of talking about how to make it work as a movie. But I've always been drawn to comedy. Whenever there's moments of comedy in the stories, I embrace them. Christine, I think, has some really funny moments. Simon Killer is really, like, they all kind of, they have like uncomfortably funny moments. This, Dev All the Time does too. I did stand-up comedy for a year when I was 18. Yeah, when I was 18.
Kidding. Oh my God.
Yeah, when I was 18, it was very much like the New York Film Academy thing. It was after 9/11, and I was just kind of, I was in high school, and my best friend's father had died in the towers, and I was I love listening to stand-up comedy, and I walked by the Comedy Cellar on McDougal Street, and they had a sign for an open mic, and I said, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do some stand-up comedy. And my friend said, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. And you're gonna come, because I need 3 people to come every week. And I did stand-up comedy, and I kind of did it. I did it for a year very religiously, and then I was kind of on the verge of, like, I could go this way and move to this. There was a guy that I was working with that went off to do a show, and he invited me to go with him to Vegas to do the show with him and have like a regular, like 5-10 minutes every week on stage, or I could go to film school. And I was like, I'm gonna go to film school.
I mean, De Niro is always a good example of somebody always associated with really dramatic, really kind of dark movies, and then he starts to do comedy, and he's actually very, very good at it.
Who?
Robert De Niro.
Oh, De Niro, yeah, totally.
Anyway, I know that it's late in Chile, and they have a smaller child and one on the way. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you
for coming and encouraging really young filmmakers like you yourself one was, and giving them advice and giving of your time. And I know that you're going to have more and more successes in your life. You're that kind of a person. You also, it's very interesting when people who are very jovial and friendly and accessible do all those dark movies. I mean, I've seen it not once but many times, so it always is very interesting. And that's it. And basically, I want to thank you again on behalf of NYFA and on behalf of the students, and continued success. And we're going to watch your movies.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Tova. And good luck, everybody.
Bye-bye.